So we were talking about just in case there's some new people. This is about two truths.
Hello， 因为可能有些人是今天新来的，那我们正在讲的是关于二谛的教授，两种真相。
This is not what I want to say is this is very intellectual, academical, and kind of technical, but this kind of discussion is very important in order to deepen and strengthen the understanding of Buddhism.
这个是属于比较智力性、比较学术性，也比较技术性的讨论。但是这样的讨论是非常重要的，为了让我们能够更深入、更强化我们对于佛法的理解。
Love and compassion and meditation and mindfulness and non-violence and all of those fantastic. They are just so venerable. They are so wholesome. Something to be something not something never enough in the world.
慈悲、禅修、正念、非暴力，这所有的一切都是非常的了不起，非常好，是如此的让人敬仰，是如此的圆满。那这些都是我们这个世间永远都不足够的一些东西。
But those things alone doesn't make Buddhism.
但是仅仅只是这些并不能构成佛教。
This serenity, gentleness, non-violence, this really does not make. Those are not a unique ingredient of Buddhism. You have to understand that.
安详、温柔、非暴力，这些并不是佛教独特的一些所独有的，并非佛教所独有的。
And just to emphasize, even the beloved mindfulness does not make Buddhism.
再强調一點，就連我們大家最喜歡的正念，這個正念自己呢，也並不構成佛教。
It's a wonderful thing, of course. Mindfulness is a great thing. People should be mindful, of course.
它是非常好的東西，當然正念是非常好的，大家都應該學習。
But if you want to study Buddhism, and if you really want to deepen your understanding of Buddhism, you have to understand, you have to really explore the truth, the technique and the system of how Buddhists sort of dig out the truth.
但是如果你要学習佛法，你要深化你對佛法的理解，那你一定要去探索什麼是真理，什麼是真諦。在佛教徒是用什麼樣的一種方法，什麼樣的一種系統來挖掘出真理。
Of course, ultimately, the purpose of understanding the truth is to liberate oneself from all the delusion.
OK。當然，我們要理解這個真諦、真理的究竟目的呢，是要讓自己從所有一切的虛妄中解脫出來。
The purpose of pages and pages of Buddhist discussion on ultimate and relative truth has got nothing to do with just intellectual satisfaction, like coffee shop conversation with cognac or whatever. It's just not just that.
我們 pages or ages?
Pages after pages.
一頁 我们一页又一页的关于这个圣义地和世俗地的教授，并不只是仅仅只是为了满足我们智力上的需求，或者在咖啡厅里面跟人家聊天，并不只是为了这个。
And for that, there are many, in order to actually get the truth, for the liberation, there are many methods.
为了要解脱而去寻求真理，这是有许多方法的。
We have many methods, not because it's kind of fun to have lots of methods. It's not because of that.
我们有很多的方法，并不是因为如果有很多方法很好玩，并不是因为这个原因。
We have many methods because there are many different types of people who have a different capacity to relate and chew and digest these methods.
我们有许多不同的方法，是因为有很多种不同类型的人，他们有各自不同的根器，能够用不同的这个根器和能力去理解、去咀嚼、去消化这些不同的方法。
As Longchenpa said, "Yangna lumpo tepachen." If there's a type of people who, from the conventional point of view, they are not smart. They're kind of idiot. But this kind of person, for them, a genuine demonstrator of a truth can do it in the most unexpected way of demonstration of the truth, such as whatever, doesn't matter.
如龙清巴大师所说的，如果有一种人从我们世俗的角度来看的话，他们非常的笨，好像白痴一样。那对于他们这种人来说，一个真实的给他们展示什么是真理的方法，如果有一个人就是真实的能够展示真理的人，他可以用一些我们最意料不到的方法去给他指出或展示出什么是真理。
Unfortunately, most of us are not these idiots.
很不幸的是，我们大部分人都不是这些笨蛋。
Unfortunately, we are somewhat a smart ass.
不幸的是，我们就是或多或少是一个比较小聪明的人。
And it is this, and that's the challenge. So we sort of have some sort of a understanding, and this kind of partial ability to comprehend makes life so difficult.
那不幸的就是我们有这样的一个挑战，就是我们有一点点的理解体会，我们有部分的能力可以去理解，可是又不完全知道，这是非常讨厌的。
So this is why Buddha himself taught so many different ways.
这就是为什么佛陀本身他用如此那么多的方法来教导。
Sometimes, many times, Buddha said things like, "Once upon a time, when I was a rabbit."
有时候，而且很多时候，佛陀会说，在某时候，我曾经是个兔子。
When I was a monkey.
当我是个猴子的时候。
See, in those phrases, he indicates there is an I, and there is a past life.
他在那些词句当中表示了，他有个我，也有过去式。
Okay, Then there are other teachings, such as the Vajracchedika Sutra, where Buddha said, if someone thinks Buddha is a form and some sort of a consciousness, a being, they have a total misunderstanding.
可是，在其他的教授里头，就像《金刚经》里头，佛陀说到，如果有人认为佛陀是个有个形象，是一个有意识的生命的话，那他们就错误了。
Again, this is something that the Oxford people would not accept.
再次，这个是那些牛津大学的人，他们无法接受的。
Because I think, okay, to be fair to the Oxford people.
好吧，那我们要对牛津的那些人，牛津大学的那些人，对他们公平一点的话。
Generally, the Oxford and like.
Oxford
and like.
一般而言，牛津大学这类的人
，they are so stuck with anything that has a record.
他们都他们困在于任何一个有记录的东西里面。
If you go to anthropology department, that's all there is. Record. That's all they study. Record. As if that's the ultimate truth.
他们就好像那些文学或者历史学家、考古学家，对不起，考古学家，他们唯一有的就是记录，对他们来讲，记录就是究竟的真相。
The Roman records, Egyptian records, Babylon records, all these records. If they find some sort of records, if they could dig it out from some unknown desert or whatever, then they just fall for it.
罗马的记录啊，埃及的记录，巴比伦的记录啊，等等。如果他们在某个不知名的沙漠中挖掘出了什么记录，那他们就会马上陷入其中。
Bear in mind, record is very, very. To trust a record is really very dangerous.
请大家谨记于心，你如果要信任这些记录的话，这是非常危险的。
We never know how those Romans carved. It may be carved on the stone, chiseled out from the stone, but we never know this carver, what kind of state they were in.
我们永远不会知道他们这些罗马人呢，他们当初是怎么在石头上雕刻，怎么去敲打这个石头的。他们确实可能是在石头上雕刻出来的，但是他当时雕刻他的心的状态如何，我们不知道。
The Romans eat and vomit and eat and vomit, and we have to trust to these kind of people's carving.
罗马人他们吃了吐，吐了吃，吃了吐，他们就是这个样子。然后我们要相信、要信任这种人，他们所雕刻出来的东西吗
？Now, India has never been good with the record.
印度从来对于这个记录做的一点都不好。
Still today, I'm sure they are not so good with the record.
即便是今天，我确定他们对这个记录这方面也做得不好。
Even as I grow up, when I was studying Buddhist philosophy, not keeping a record is actually a pride. It's a matter of pride.
就连当仁波切在成长时学习佛教哲理的时候，对于他们来讲，不去记录，这对他们说是很值得骄傲的一件事。
We are told everything you have to learn by heart, because this is a spiritual path. What's the point of writing it down, carving it on a stone? You learn by heart. You learn by mind. So this is what has been emphasized for hundreds of years. And of course, now this is being laughed at. And in a way, you can say it's backfiring.
他们就是都被从小都必须将所有的一切教法都记在心里。因为这个是一个修行的法门、修行的方法、修行之道。 那如果你何必去写下来，何必去雕刻？你应该是用你的心、你的意去记得。那这本身就足够了。他们100多年来都是用这样的方法来教导、来学习。当然，今时今日，他们也就是人们也开始嘲笑他们，所以可能这个方法也有点就是现在可能有点不太就是现在可能人家在嘲笑他们。
Here I just like to tell you, you know, at the end, you are your own master. You have to use your own intellect to, you know, value whatever you are pursuing. Only you can do it.
到最终呢，其实你就是自己的导师，你拥有自己的智力，到最后只有你自己可以去定夺衡量你自己在追求的东西。
You have to be critical and analytical.
你必须有批判性，并且自己去分析。
You can't afford to be a sycophant.
Sycophant means like
following whatever.
你不能够就是只是不断的去追随别人说的。
The Buddhist philosophy study is actually a study to make you learn the tools of how to analyze, how not to be sycophant, how to be critical in a good way, productive way.
我们在学习佛教的哲理呢，是为了让你学习如何去分析，如何不只是盲目的追随别人的教法，如何有批判性的思考，但是是以一种有建设性的方法去进行批判。
Anyway, coming back to the subject here, we are trying to establish. We are learning the art of establishing the truth. Yeah.
那回到这里的主题呢，我们现在要学习如何去这个建立起真谛的艺术。
For the sake of analysis, we are given two ways to think of this. By dividing the truth into ultimate truth and relative truth, and which, by the way, I remind you, are both relative truth.
为了要帮助我们去分析呢，我们在这里分成2种去思维的方法。我们将真理分开来，分成圣义谛和世俗谛。但是在这里，仁波切再次提醒我们，圣义谛和世俗谛2个都是世俗谛。
Which, by the way, you can always argue, saying that this is you Buddhist term, like 2 truths. Why can't we have 3 truths or 5 truths? Sure, no problem. But, you know, more likely you will have to end up agreeing the 2 truths.
当然你也
Because, you know, fake or non-fake, you know, this.
当然，你总是可以在这边提出说，这个是你们佛教自己的用语，你也可以说有3谛、5谛，这没有问题的。但是你说到最后，大部分你还是会剩下2个东西，就是因为你只有假的和不是假的这2个选择。
Okay, so we are talking about the relative truth.
那我们刚才说到这个相对的世俗谛。
And we were talking about having 2 kinds of relative truth.
那我们也说到有2种世俗谛。
And at the moment we are trying to sort of characterize or define what is a valid relative truth. What makes relative truth, valid relative truth? Yeah, what makes something valid relative truth.
那我们也就讨论到这个世俗谛它的2种特性或者2种定义，它是不是一个成立可成立的世俗谛？什么东西让一个世俗谛是可成立的世俗谛呢？
And we talk. Okay, so there are 4 different reasons. There are many others, but in this text we are is presenting 4.
有4个主要的原因，当然也有更多其他的原因，但是我们所使用的法本这里分成4类，4个原因。
Consensus.
同意，大家同意的。
Okay. Function.
功能。
You know, because of the function, that's why it's something. That's why it's valid.
一样东西是因为它的功能，所以它是成立的。
Shoes, for instance, a valid relative truth because it functions as a truth, as a shoes, not as a glove.
比方说，鞋子是个可成立的世俗谛，因为它的作用、它的功能就是作为一双鞋子，而不是用来当手套。
And also that which is product of cause and condition.
然后就是一个是因和缘所产生的结果。
So this is and that's quite important because we are talking about order. Marigold, you plant marigold comes out. You know that kind of order.
这是相当重要的，因为我们说的是一个顺序。你种一个花的种子出来，就有一朵花，所以有个顺序。
And that, actually, the third one is a very big subject. In this subject, we talk about the karma.
其实这第3点是一个非常广大的课题，在这个课题里面，我们讨论到业力因果。
Again, here there's a lot to say about the British.
在此又有很多可以关于英国人，我们所以可以谈到的。
But we don't want to dwell on too much on this one for now.
可是我们暂时不要花太多时间在这里。
By the way, when I say British, I'm not talking about Manchester United or Chelsea football clubs.
不过当我说英国人的时候，我不是说这个曼联啊，然后这些足球队。
I'm talking about the British Buddhist, and especially those who are holding prominent positions, who are supposedly teaching some of the best university in the world, like Oxford, Cambridge.
我说的是那些英国的佛教徒，尤其是那些在大专学府占据一些特别重要的位置的一些教授，尤其是好像在牛津大学牛津大学这些地方的人。
And sometimes, I really feel that they are sort of a closet extremists who are teaching Buddhism.
有时候我真的觉得他们是一些躲在柜子里面的未出柜的极端分子，他们装扮成他们在教导佛教。
Anyway, let me cool down this one,
仁波切说让我冷静一点。
As I'm getting old, I'm getting really, so strong about this. At the moment, I'm only using generic term like British Buddhists. Very soon, in about a year, I'm going to actually name them and put their birthdays and address and everything.
当我年纪越来越大的时候，我对这些感觉越来越强烈。那目前我用的只是一些很一般的广泛性的词语，好像叫他们什么英国的佛教徒。再多几年，我确定我会写下他们，我会说他们的出生日期、他们的地址等等。
And really, you need to hear this because especially the younger generations, the university students, you need to hear this.
你们必须听到这一点，尤其是那个年轻一代，这些上大学的人，你们必须听到这一点。
Okay. The fourth.
第四点。
The fourth reason, which we used the word falsifiable yesterday. What makes a valid relative? What makes something valid relative truth? That which can be, well, we use the word falsifiable. That which can be falsified.
那第4个理由就是 昨天提到它的此是可否证性、反证伪性或可否证性。那是什么呢？可以让我们确定一样东西是不是可成立的世俗谛，是看它是否具备可否证性。我们可以证明它是伪的、虚假。
And this is really, really the most important reasoning. So important.
这真的是最重要的这个理由，我们可以运用的这个理由推理。
It actually, even practically speaking, if you are a meditator, if you are a practitioner, this argument will help you.
就连在实际而言的话，如果你是个修行人，你是个禅修者，这对你会有帮助。
Basically, everything we accept as a valid relative truth, like chairs, shoes, whatever, doesn't matter, the floor, the ceiling, the bodhigaya, the path, the enlightenment, the death, the birth, the old age, the sickness, if you analyze them, they fall apart. We will do it. We will analyze it.
基本上，所有的一切，所有让你所接受为成立的世俗谛的一切，无论是鞋子、地板、天花板、菩提迦叶、死亡、证悟、生、病、老等等，这所有的一切，如果你去分析它们的话，它们马上就瓦解了。那我们现在就会进行这方面的分析。
The very famous analytical method of Chandrakirti, the 7 analytical method of chariot, for instance. Like a chariot, which you can see here, by the way, not as a decoration, but as actually a functional thing. Chariot. If you analyze, is the wheel chariot? Is the horse chariot? Is the, like, each and every single bits and pieces, if you slice them, deconstruct them, you will not find a single entity that which is real chariot.
这个非常著名的月称菩萨所使用的分析的方法，它有7种这个方法来分析一个马车，而我们在这里也可以看到一个真正实用的马车，而不是只是做装饰而用的。所以我们看到一个马车，如果你去分析的话，它的轮子、它的马，这每一块，你把这个马车分成每一片、每一块，把它给瓦解，那你根本就经过这个过程，你根本就找不到任何一个个体可以称之为马车。
What is the word caprice? Caprice? Whim? Whim. What does that mean?
A little thing of no consequence. Without reason.
Without reason. So it's arbitrary. Arbitrary?
Yeah. Can be. But caprice is like, it's not necessarily arbitrary, but it isn't profound.
It's not profound. Okay, good. It's just imputed from impulse, right? It's a, yeah. So according, so relative truth, the valid relative truth, one of the aspects of the valid relative truth is actually everything is just an arbitrary. It's just, and it works, by the way. I'm not saying it doesn't work. Chariot works as a chariot. You can ride on it and it will reach somewhere. All of this. But all this happens on an arbitrary projection of an impulse, caprice, whim, whatever you want to put it.
那 成立的世俗谛的其中一方面呢，它就是所有的一切都是虚设的，但是它是行得通的。我并没有说它行不通，就好像马车，它是行得通的，你可以骑上马车，坐着它去到某个地方。但这所有的一切都仅仅只是一种虚设的一种投射，就是出于你的冲动而虚设出来的一种投射。
It's like, temporarily just sort of hanging together, like.
它有点像是暂时的，所有的一切都是暂时的，在那边顶着。顶在那里，暂时的。
And we are saying that all of us is an arbitrary projection, impulse, a projection of impulse. All of us, and not only just human beings. Everything is an arbitrary.
我们说的是，我们所有人都是这个冲动所投射出来的一种冲动生出的一种虚设的投射，而不仅仅只是人类，所有的一切都是这样的。
Mata mache nyamgawa, we call it in Tibetan. Mata mache nyamgawa, without analysis, without any, like digging out, trying to find whatever is the truth, like slicing, deconstructing. Nyamga is like just accepting as at its face value, so to speak. But it functions, it has an order.
那它是你在没有分析的时候，你如果没有去挖掘它，你没有试图去分解它，去寻找它的真理的话，如果你仅仅只是在它表面的层面上去接受它，那它是有它的功能，有它的作用，它有它的顺序。
And this is how everything exists, as arbitrary as whatever I've been saying. The shoes, the chariot, enlightenment, Buddhism, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, all of this.
这就是所有一切存在的情形，就是都是这个虚设的，就好像鞋子、马车、政务、佛教、佛法、僧，这一切都是如此。
I have to say this, reincarnation.
他也必须说轮回转世。
And I have to say this because the British Buddhists, those who call themselves sort of non-religious Buddhists, whatever, they claim themselves Buddhists, but they always shy away, or they sort of look down at the concept of reincarnation as it is something to do with the Tibetan thing. This proves that they have no idea about what is relative truth.
因为这些英国的佛教徒，那些自称自己不会有非宗教性的佛教徒，他们这种自称为佛教徒的人，他们总是一直尽量远离，或者甚至他们看不起这个轮回转世。他们几乎是认为轮回转世是西藏的人创造出来的，这就证明了他们根本就不懂什么是世俗谛。
If you do that, you are underestimating relative truth.
如果你这么做的话，你低估了世俗谛。
If you underestimate relative truth, you become nihilist.
如果你低估世俗谛，你就成为虚无主义者。
You have the full potential wearing an explosive around your waist and blow up yourself. You are an extremist. These British Buddhists are extremists. I'm telling you, you can carve it on your door or something.
你绝对具备完整，你绝对具备所有的潜能，来会在自己的腰间系上这个爆炸物，而去爆炸，去炸掉某些东西的极端分子。你们这样的英国佛教徒就是极端分子。我这一句话，你可以把它雕刻在你的门槛上面。
If you, of course,
你的门上。
just because we are talking here, if you overestimate ultimate truth, you are also an extremist.
如果你过于高估这个ultimate truth， 圣义谛，那你也是一个极端分子。
Truth, okay, to put it on a more layman's language.
用我们比较通俗的话来讲，
You see, this is what happens with these British Buddhists. This is what they do.
这些英国佛教徒他们是这么做的。
They wear I need a help. Rowan, what's that sort of, not a beret, but something that the British always wear, that hat? What? Pola. Yes. What? Bola? Bolan? Yes. They wear a Bolan hat. They're usually kind of bald.
这个他说这些英国的佛教徒，他们很喜欢戴一种 bowler 的帽子。不好意思，我不知道，他们特别爱戴的一种帽子，但他们一般是秃头的。
And then they begin with saying like, oh, you know, like.
然后他们说话开始的会说哦这样。
And you know what? They take pride. You see, they laugh at reincarnation, and they take pride in laughing at reincarnation as a result of analysis. This is why it is wrong.
你知道他们怎么做呢？他们会嘲笑这个轮回，而且他们对于自己嘲笑轮回觉得很骄傲，因为他们如何嘲笑轮回呢？他们将轮回作为分析的结论而嘲笑它，为此感到骄傲，而这就是为什么他们错误了。
Because if you analyze, forget reincarnation, there is no Bolan on the top of his bald head.
因为如果你去分析的话，就这个轮回就别提了，在他的这个秃头的这个头上面呢，根本没有这个 bowler 的帽子。
So to say, you know, and these are the same people who promote mindfulness, by the way, as if this is the thing that saves the world.
而就是这些人，他们不断的在推动发扬正念的修法，几乎是认为正念就可以拯救世界。
And if you analyze the mindfulness, it does not exist.
如果你去分析正念，这正念也不存在。
Because mindfulness is an arbitrary, imputed by impulse.
因为正念它是由我们的冲动所虚设的去构造出来的东西。
This is why when you meet next time these people, you should really check what they are wearing on their waist.
这就是为什么下一次你碰到这样的人的时候，你应该去查一查他的腰间系着什么东西。
And imagine these are the people who are actually teaching to some of the biggest learning centers in Europe.
那你想象一下，这些是他们这些人正在教导的，他们是在一些欧洲最大的学府、大专学府在教导。
And getting paid.
而且还受薪。
With the taxpayers' money.
就是大家纳税人的钱受薪。
Because they have a degree.
因为他们有个学士，有学位。
Anyway, going back to the real thing.
回到我们真正的要讲的东西。
But you know, this is really important. Really. Relative truth is an arbitrary projection of impulse. Mata mache nyamgawa, we call it. Okay? No analysis.
这真的非常重要。世俗谛是我们的冲动所投射出来的一种虚构的、虚设的投射，这是在没有分析的时候。
Okay, so what is the invalid relative truth?
那什么是不成立的世俗谛呢？
Now, this one is a difficult one.
那这个比较难。
Okay, first, just as an, briefly, just an example, valid relative truth, I've already said, like the moon on the sky, in the sky, and the invalid relative truth is like a painting of the moon or a reflection of the moon in the mirror or the lake. Yeah?
那很简略的打个比方说，成立的世俗谛就好像天空上面的这个空中的月亮，那不成立的世俗谛就好像画出来的月亮，或者水中或镜子里水中的倒影或镜子里的这个反映出的月亮。
The opposite of the fourth thing, consensus, like the painting of the moon in the, it doesn't work. It has no function. And even if you talk about consensus, nobody will say this is a real moon. It doesn't function as a moon. It's not it doesn't of course it is a byproduct of a cause and condition as a painting of the moon, but it's not the real moon.
那就是跟之前说的是相反的。你比方说画中的月亮，当然就是大家都同意它不是真正的月亮，它大家都同意它不是真正月亮，它也没有月亮的功能。那它当然是作为因缘的产品呢，它是这个画中的月亮，但它并不是真正的月亮。
And also you can deconstruct the arbitrary imputed painted moon, but you cannot deconstruct this as a real moon. You understand?
当然，你可以去瓦解、拆解这个虚设的所制造出来的这个画中的月亮，但是你不能够把它作为一个真实的月亮来进行瓦解。
Basically, you don't have to tell anyone that this is not real moon.
基本上你不需要跟任何人说这不是真实的月亮。
Right? Okay, but now that's kind of easy to understand. But now this is a very big argument in the Buddhist, study.
那当然，这个是很简单的，易于理解。但现在我们要说的，在这个佛教的学习里面呢，是非常非常大的一个争论。
Okay, so for a Buddhist, this lotus is a valid relative truth.
对于佛教徒来说，这个前面的莲花是可成立的世俗谛。
The God, the Almighty, the Creator, which is imputed by the religious people, is not even valid relative truth. It is invalid relative truth.
这个全能的创造的主或者上帝呢，他们是由这些宗教人士所创造出来的。那它根本都不是一个可成立的世俗谛，它是一个不成立的世俗谛。
Now this is really big.
这是
Now
很大的。
within the Buddhist, if you ask a guy like Chandrakirti, he would say anyone who is not a follower of but Nagarjuna, their thesis, their view is invalid relative truth. Now this is a big statement. This has, there's so much argument.
在佛教徒当中呢，月称菩萨他会说，任何不追随这个龙树菩萨的论述的人，他们所相信的都是不成立的世俗谛。 这是很大的一句话，在这当中有许许多多各方面的争论。
But here, because of, again, always the time, I'm only presenting you this definition of this two relative truth, valid and invalid, very briefly. There are so many different studies and deeper studies on this.
因为时间的缘故，这一次只能够给大家定义说这个两种世俗谛，就是可成立和不可成立的。但其实有很多种方法，在这个佛教的研习里面有很多的方法去理解。
So just to give you an example, okay, for the Buddhists, especially Mahayana, they would say like this, like a samsaric life, whatever we have, like wealth, health, body, all this is valid relative truth because you can use it, function, there's a function, because you can use it as a base of things like impermanence meditation, because it is impermanent, it is decaying, it is falling apart, all that. Whereas concepts such as Almighty Creator is totally useless.
从佛教的角度，尤其是佛教徒的角度，尤其是大乘佛教徒的角度来说，我们世俗的轮回当中的所有东西，比方说财富、健康、身体，它们都有它的作用。它可以作为一个根基，让我们进行，比方说进行无常的禅修，因为这个身体本身就是无常的，它一直在损坏，一直在解构。那这样的一些概念。
Again, I want to remind you, ultimately there is no such thing as relative truth and ultimate truth.
再次提醒大家，究竟而言，其实没有所谓的世俗谛和圣义谛。Okay, just a few. Remember I was saying there is really a much deeper studies on these two relative truths, not ultimate. We are not touching the ultimate truth here. Valid and invalid relative truth. 那如们之前说的。关于这两种世俗谛，我们说的还不是圣义谛，现在只是说两种成立和不成立的世俗谛，还有更深入的研究。
Okay, I will just choose one. We are now being very specific, so this is a little technical and it's going to be a little difficult, but just for a taste of how deeper we can study, so to speak.
那仁波切这里选择一样来跟我们说，这个会比较仔细，然后也比较技术性，也比较困难一点，只不过是为了给我们尝一尝这个味道，说怎么去更深入的去理解它。
Okay, let's say a practitioner. How does the relative truth functions with a practitioner?
比方说一个修行人，世俗谛对于一个修行人来说有什么样的一种作用呢？
A practitioner, okay, a struggling practitioner When he or she sees or hear or tastes things, but do all of that with mindfulness, then what he sees, what he hears, what he sees, what he hears, what he tastes, what he feels, all of this is valid relative truth.
对于一个在挣扎着修行的修行人来说，当他看到、听到、尝到东西的时候，当他在做这一切，他以正念来进行这一切的时候，那他所看到、听到、尝到、感觉到的，这所有一切都是可成立的世俗谛。
Every time he doesn't have a mindfulness, all of that is invalid relative truth.
每当他没有正念的时候，这所有都是不成立的世俗谛。
Such as the daydream.
比方说做白日梦。
You know, your mind goes out, your mindfulness is already gone, you are entangled, you are planning.
那因为你做白日梦，你的心就脱离了，跑出去了，你的正念就失去了，然后你也被卷入了，那你已经开始在计划东西。
Okay, I'm explaining this because there's quite an important reason which I will tell you later.
仁波切解释这些是因为有个相当重要的理由，他等一下会告诉我们。
Once you reach the first bhumi, then a practitioner who has reached the first bhumi, for him or her, all the perceptions during the post-meditation time is valid relative truth.
Valid.
Post-meditation.
因为一旦你达到这个初地的证到初地的时候，就是一个初地果位的修行人，对于他来讲，他所有的下座后的感官，所有的感知都是可成立的这个世俗谛。
Remember definition of relative truth?
记得这个世俗谛的定义吗？
Deceiving, cheating. It's a deception, right? It's cheating. It's not true. It's a delusion.
它是具欺广性的，它是欺骗的，它不真实，它是一个它是一个无明的愚昧的。
So this raises a question. So does the 10th Bhumi Bodhisattva during the post-meditation time, is his experience deceiving, cheating, delusion? Yes.
那现在我们就提出这个问题：那十地菩萨呢？他在下座后的所有的感官、所有的感知，是否是欺骗的等等呢？是的，全都是具欺骗性。
Then, you know, all the Buddhist fanatics will go, "Wow, how can that be? They are great bodhisattvas."
那所有的佛教的狂热分子，他们会说：哇，这怎么可能呢？这些都是伟大的菩萨。
They do not accumulate any more cause of delusion.
他们不再积聚任何的这个无明的知因。
But the effect of the previous emotion and the grasping still there.
但是他们过去的情绪或烦恼以及执取的这个的结果呢的后果还是存在的。
Like if you keep a sandalwood in a box, and even if the sandalwood is gone, the smell of the sandalwood remains.
比方说，如果你在盒子里面装了檀香，就算檀香已经没有檀香了，但是它的香味还留存在里面。
Okay, the reason why I need to tell you this is for the Buddha, there is no valid relative truth.
为什么要告诉我们这一点？是因为对于佛陀而言，他并没有任何的可成立的世俗谛。
Does that mean that he only sees the ultimate truth? No.
这是不是说他只看得见圣义地呢？不是的。
Remember, ultimate truth and relative truth is relative truth.
记得吗？我们说过，这个世俗地和圣义地两者都是世俗地。
For the Buddha, he can't understand why we are talking about relative truth and ultimate truth. What is that?
对佛陀而言，他都不能理解我们为什么要说世俗地和圣义地。那到底是什么呢？
What's the complication for?
为什么要那么复杂呢？
Even though this was taught by him, you understand?
虽然这些是他教的，你明白吗？
For the Buddha, distinctions and the boundary of the true truth is exhausted.
对佛陀而言，二谛的分别或界限已经sorry, the last word is exhausted， 已经耗尽了。
Just to, because I know there's so many tantrikas here.
因为这里有很多的密续的修行者，
Anyway, who claims
他们自称是
the visualizations,
观想
deities,
本尊，
no matter how many heads they have,
无论他们有多少只手臂，
no matter what kind of, like incredible, attributes they hold,
无论他们有那么多不可思议的象征，
they are all valid relative truth.
他们全都是可成立的世俗谛。
Actually, there's an argument.
这就是我们的论述。
Some say, yeah. I don't want to go to that argument right now.
我们不想再多讲这方面的东西。
There are valid relative truth. There are arbitrary. They're imputed from an impulse.
他们是可成立的世俗谛，他们是虚设的，他们是冲动而投射而制造出来的。
They are usable, by the way. They
他
are
们
usable.
可用。
Okay. Now, this is, of course, a very, very generic understanding of deity.
这当然是对于本尊来讲是一个很广泛的说法。
I will, if there's anybody who wants to defend British Buddhist, now is the chance.
如果有任何人想替这些英国的佛教徒说点话的话，现在是你可以说话的机会。
Rimcha, thank you very much for your teaching these 2 days. 我现在用中文好吗？我们今天跟昨天有提到啊，在那个世俗谛里面成立的世俗谛里面有4个特征。那第4个啊，是前面3个我们大概可以就是在我们日常生活里面大概可以了解。第一个是大家共同承认的，第二个是它是有功能的，第3个是因果的关系，第4个他说是可证明为是错误的，可证明是伪的。这点可不可以请人介多说明一下？我听不懂为什么说是可证明为错误的或虚伪的？谢谢。
So Rinpoche talked about the valid relative truths and therefore characteristics, and the first three is kind of understandable from our daily life, but the fourth one, falsifiable, can you explain, because it's quite hard to understand.
As I said, like the chariots, if you deconstruct, you will not find the, one that you call real chariot. That's it.
如之前说过的这个马车，如果你把马车分解开来的话，你找不到一个真正的，你可以称之为真正的马车的实体的个体。
Albert is an ex-student of one of those British.
Albert 是其中一个那个英国人的过去的弟子或学生。
Now is a good.
You better check if I've got any bombs around my waist. No, actually, I just wanted to ask, from a very mundane practice point of view, how do we apply this to, on a day-to-day level when we have arisings of disturbing emotions? How can we actually apply it? Is it more like doing analytical meditation of your analytical analysis of the kind of, because disturbing emotions would be valid relative truth in this reckoning.
从世俗的角度没有，就是从我们一般修行来说呢，或者我们每一天生活的时候要怎么去运用这样的一个法教呢？是不是做分析性的禅修？因为我们的情绪都是可成立的世俗谛。
Yeah, like you said, for a lot of people it works as an analytical thing.
像如你所说的，对很多人而言，它这个是好像分析性的东西。
Also, it's always good to establish the view.
而且建立起这个见地总是非常好的。
But the most important is for a practitioner, especially in the Mahayana Buddhism, the biggest thing that you should be really be cautious of after many years of meditation is coming to conclusion. When you come to a conclusion, it can be very dangerous. This is why, like even the Mahasandhi, Dzogpa Chenpo, they say, as long as you think this is it, it's never it. And this kind of thing always helps. That's why I'm telling, like the British people who, I think in English they have this expression called cherry picking. It's exactly that. The mindfulness, this is all right. It's, like, this is something they like. Reincarnation now, that's, because that goes against their whatever, you understand, that monotheistic gene. And then they get rid of it. That's absolutely criminal.
但是呢，非常重要的是，对于修行人而言，尤其是大乘的修行人，你最需要谨慎的，就是你在多年禅修以后，如果你到最后你有一个结论，你一旦有一个结论的话，尤其是在这个当你有一个结论的时候，那是非常危险的。因此，在大圆满的教授里面呢，他也说，你一旦认为这就是了，这就是那一点了，那永远，你如果觉得这就是，那就永远都不是。所以这样的教授是对我们有帮助的，也就是因为这样，仁波切不断的告诉这些英国人。在英文有这样一个词语，就是你去挑一些你喜欢的东西，在这所有的教法里面，你挑你喜欢的一些东西。比方说，这些英国人他们会说：“正念这是可以的，因为他们喜欢正念。但是对于轮回，因为轮回是跟他们这个 他们的这种一神论主义的这个基因是违背他们一神论主义的这个基因，所以他们是反对关于这个转世的教授。这样的做法绝对是这样的做法绝对是一个很大的罪过。
You know, I get torn apart. Because, you know, the non-violence, the mindfulness, Buddhism, you know, it's kind of a good packaging. So in this way, it's sort of, you know, helping Buddhism, you know, sort of a good image, you know, it's like, you know, so, you know, I like to keep quiet. Because if you lose this analysis, and if you only teach mindfulness as how it is taught at the moment, I could really turn around and argue about mindfulness being the ultimate cause of constipation. I'm serious. If you lose this argument, it is the cause of constipation. I'm serious. Because, you know, you're just so paranoid that you are not mindful. You know, like, that alone must be killing you.
因为其实仁波切自己本身也非常的纠结，因为呢，就是这个非暴力和正念对佛教来讲是个很好的包装，它在某方面它对于佛教是个帮助，就是很好的一种包装。但是仁波切有时候就是也是所以他有时候也是比较沉默不说。但事实上，如果你失去了佛教失去这方面的东西，那其实仁波切也可以转过来反说，就是因为你教了正念，所以他可以说，就是因为正念就是造成他constipation， 女人们，我没有 constipation 的问题，便秘对。就是他可以反过来说，正念就是造成他便秘的究竟的原因，因为当你一旦失去了这方面的论述的话，你可以说便秘是对不起，正念是便秘的究竟原因，因为你一直很紧张，说自己有没有正念，有没有保持正念，所以这一点本身都会把我们给就是杀死了。
You know, the effortlessness, the path of the Sugata, effortlessness. You know, like, instead of, I don't know, how do you say, this tight, you know, tight, that sort of confined, puritanical. You know, that's not Buddhism.
无需用力，无需作力。这个善事之道，这个善事就是如来的意思，就是逝去的是善事之道。那这种不需用力的这种教法，而不是那种很紧，抓得很紧、很清教式的这种做法，那个是佛教。那种很紧、很清教式的、很局限的那种做法，不是佛教。
I mean, how do you measure what is mindfulness to begin with?
我们首先说，你怎么去测量、怎么去衡量什么是正念呢？
Will become very dangerous, I'm telling you.
这样下去的话会非常危险。
Okay, any more other? Okay, Badri. Actually, Badri, I want to ask. Oh, you want to ask first? Yeah, why don't you ask?
My name is Amitav, and actually I follow different tradition. I have bit core, but I try to speak clearly. I wanted to ask you one question. You said that all truths are relative truths, right? So, do you think that it is because the essence of teaching is beyond mind and speech? Man और वाणी से परे. It's beyond mind and speech. The essence of teaching is beyond mind and speech. Do you think that? That's why we can say everything is a relative truth, right?
Beyond mind and...
Say hello. Hi. Because we are having problem hearing, are you saying that because of mind and space?
Because the essence that we are talking about in teaching, ultimate truth, that is also relative. But whatever truth is there in teaching, that cannot be explained by mind or by speech. Does it mean that?
Yeah. The ultimate truth cannot be.
是的，究竟的圣业地不能够用心和语言来表达。
That aspect that cannot be taught. That actually is not exclusive to Buddhism, by the way. So-called Hinduism also has that.
这个无法被教授的这一方面的东西，其实并不是佛教专有或独有的，这所谓的印度教也有这方面的东西。
And I think like the first shloka of Tao Te Ching.
然后这个《道德经》的第一个偈颂也是。
If you permit me one more question, sir.
Yes.
What I think that whatever we see from mind is basically name and form, right? So that's why it's a relative truth. Is it correct?
Yes. Whatever we see, the moment we think, we see, we hear, it always ends up becoming a thing at the moment. That's why you are right. That's why it's so difficult to get out of this zone. But there is a way. There is a way. There's many ways, not only one way.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
任何我们见到的东西，我们一旦认为自己见到、听到、想到，那我们一旦就是听到、见到、想到，它就成为一个东西。对我们目前来讲，也就是为什么呢？我们很难脱离现在，脱离自己的这个目前的地带。但是是有方法，有很多，不止一个方法，而是很多方法可以脱离的。
Okay, actually, I want to expand this a little bit. So whatever we see, hear, taste, feel, it's a thing. And the thing is a zone. We are already in this zone. And we have to get out of it. And so we feel sometimes, how? How can it be possible? Because even to wanting to get out is a thing.
那他再多讲一些，就是每当我们看到、听到、尝到、感受到什么的时候，它对我们来讲，它就成为一样东西。这个东西也就是成为一个地带。那我们现在就在这个地带里面，而我们有时候要尝试脱离这个地带。可是有时候我们会想，或会觉得，如何脱离呢？怎么有可能脱离呢？因为仅仅是想要脱离，这个想要脱离也成为一样东西。
You might find like you are in a prison because there's just no way out. There's no access somebody can come in and rescue you. You understand? You are like completely in this thing zone.
那你会发现自己在一个牢狱里面、监狱里面，根本没有任何方法可以出去，也没有人可以有方法进来去救你出去。我们现在就困在这个东西的地带里头。
But actually, this is where I think Buddha excels.
但是事实上，这就是佛陀他已经 进入的地方，就是找到方法的地方。
What he's saying is this thing zone, everything has its own fault. And we have to take advantage of that fault. So, you understand, it has a fault. Right now we are not taking advantage of this fault. We are trying to mend the fault. We are trying to fix it and fix it and fix it. But actually it's like all this thing is a self-destructive, actually. They will destroy each other. We just have to take advantage of that. Then it will fall apart. When it falls apart, there is no such thing as outside of this zone. Because when there is no this zone, there is no outside of this zone anymore.
因为佛陀呢，他说这一个东西的地带，他们所有的一切东西都有它的过失，它的缺点，它的过失。那我们要充分利用它的过失。那这些所有一切都有它的过失，可是我们没有利用它。那我们开始去修补它，开始去填上，就是把它修补。那其实如果我们去利用它的话，那这所有的一切都是自我毁灭的，他们所有一切都是自我，并且互相毁灭。那我们如果善用这个去利用这个情况的话，那所有的一切都会自行的瓦解。当一切瓦解的时候，就没有所谓的去到这个地带的外面，因为已经没有地带了，那怎么会有地带之外呢？
To give you an example, like impermanence meditation, we are bringing nothing from outside. Impermanence is the character of this zone, and we basically take advantage of that.
比方说，无常的禅修，我们并没有从外头引进什么东西，因为无常就是这个地带的特性，我们仅仅是利用了它的这个特性。
Meaning, we use the character of the samsara to destroy the samsara.
意思就是说，我们用轮回的特性来摧毁轮回。
All the way to Guru devotion.
就算一直到这个上师的虔诚心，对上师虔诚心的这个修法。
Guru devotion is an emotion.
对上师的信心，这是一种情绪。
Again, it's this thing, it's a zone, it's within this zone.
它同样的是个东西，是个地带。
And we use the Guru devotion to deconstruct the Guru devotion, the paraphernalia of Guru business.
那我们也是运用这个对上师的虔诚心来摧毁、瓦解上师虔敬心，这所有有关这个上师的这些很疯狂的东西。
Yeah, you have to learn to use the samsaric virus, so to speak, to harm themselves.
我们要学习去使用轮回中的细菌或病菌去摧毁轮回。
Of course, it's not that easy because there's that habit that we can fix it.
当然不太容易，因为我们有这样的一个习气，就是要去修理它。
Basically, so-called Ngondo practice is a repetition of practice of I can't fix it.
基本上，我们所谓的前行的修法，就是不断的重复的修，就是练习说，我没法去整修它。
Just this morning, I've told somebody to chant 1 million times, I can't fix it.
今天早上仁波切让一个人去持诵100万遍的，我无法去修理它。
If you feel like doing, yeah, why not?
如果你也想这么修，为什么不要呢？可以啊。
Badri,
Rinpoche, I am most grateful for your teachings. It really felt like the lion's roar, and it really put the Monlam in the correct perspective for me. Thank you.
你的开示就好像狮子吼一样，那你是不是能够告诉我这一次的祈愿会，我要用什么样正确的态度观点去看？
To clarify, you mentioned that for the first Bhumi Bodhisattva, the post-meditative experience is that of valid relative truth. What about the meditative experience of the first Bhumi Bodhisattva?
那你提到初地菩萨的坐下的经验呢，是成立的世俗谛。那他们在坐上的时候，他们的就是他们禅修的时候的经验呢是什么
We will be talking about it tomorrow. Are we teaching tomorrow? Yeah. We will be teaching about this tomorrow, but it is something to do with a union. Well, anyway, the meditative state of the first Bhumi Bodhisattva has no concept of relative truth and ultimate truth. Okay?
我们明天下午会讨论这一点，但是这个初地菩萨他们在禅修的状态中的时候是没有圣义谛世俗谛的概念。
But because he is not the Buddha yet,
但是因为他们还不是佛，
he slips into post-meditation.
所以他会他会掉入这个就是坐下的，就是不在禅修的状态里面。
But you know, as Chandrakirti said, talking about these first Bhumi Bodhisattva onwards, we said, you know, Cheji Samadhi Nyeji Malaso. It's like, right, you know, this is Chandrakirti, okay, this is not me. He said the arhats are like a small insect that makes a small hole in a wood, and then they stay inside the wood, and they think that this is the sky. And then talk about sky. You understand? These insects, oh, the sky, the vast sky. You understand? That's how it is, you know, the arhats, when they talk about emptiness and the meditative state of the, you know, first Bhumi, it's a bit like that.
如月称菩萨所说的这个这是月称菩萨，不是仁波切说的。月称菩萨说，当我们谈到这个论及这个初地菩萨的时候，它有点像这样的情形，就是阿罗汉呢，他们好像一个小小的昆虫，在这个木头里头钻了一个小洞，然后他就留在这个木头里头，然后他认为那个洞就是天空，然后他就在那边说着关于天空的事情。这就是说，阿罗汉他们在谈到这个空性和禅修的状态，他们的情况就是有点像这样的。
Many times the first Bhumi Bodhisattvas will willingly, happily slip into post-meditation time.
很多时候，初地菩萨会心甘情愿的、很开心的滑入这个下座的状态，就是出来，从他的禅修状态出来。
Because it is in that time, in one moment, they can see 100 Buddha and listen to 100 different teachings. So it must be a lot of fun, you know.
因为在那个时候，在一瞬间，他们可以看见100尊佛在教授100个教授，所以那应该是很好玩的。
Any other questions? Yeah. Oh.
No, this is a delicate one. I think I heard you say that if the British Buddhists don't understand reincarnation, they don't understand relative truth. Is that right?
If they say, if they cannot accept reincarnation after analysis, meaning they are violating the game of relative truth, then they cannot understand the truth. Then they become nihilist.
那仁波切是说，如果这些英国的佛教徒他们在分析了以后无法接受轮回的话，那他们就违反了世俗谛，他们就违反了世俗谛的游戏，那他们就无法理解实相，那他们就成为虚无主义者。
The four tests of valid relative truth, Rinpoche, I'm not quite clear on whether something has to pass all four tests to be valid, or whether there's some kind of priority, or whether it's just one of the tests.
That's good, yes.
关于一个世俗谛是否成立，不是有4个理由吗？那他这位师兄就是问，是否他必须符合这4个条件，还是符合其中一个条件，还是这4个条件有它的前后的顺序？
Actually, I think one is all.
其实1就是4。
Yeah, it's just for the sake of study. This is not only it. There's so many other categories. That's why these monks, they spend 9 years studying just this, and they never get a job afterwards.
这1就是全部，而其实也不仅只是这4个，有很多很多的不同的分类。也就是为什么这些和尚他们要学9年，然后学了以后又找不到工作。
Because it's
But then if I have consensus with a couple of people that doing circumambulations is not helping with anything, and that's my experience, there's no function there, then that's valid relative truth for me, for everybody?
Yes.
Right. So valid relative truth and invalid relative truth can be different for different people?
Yes, it's very, very, yeah. Now you are going really deeper, finer and finer point, yes. It overlaps a lot. Because we are talking about relative truth, arbitrary, impulse, caprice, whim, remember? That's why I was saying you have to talk about, you have to sort of accept the reincarnation on that level. Mm-hmm. Because if you analyze and say this does not exist, you are in a trouble.
But if you analyze it and you accept if you just accept heaven and hell or something as an alternative model which supports you and works for you, then that's fine. I mean, you might not be a
Buddhist. Do you want to
Buddhist.
translate that verse? Actually, yeah, that's important. Yeah.
那刚才这位师兄举例说，他不认为，很多人不认为你绕塔或者转塔呢有什么意思。那他自己的经验中也觉得没有什么作用。那对他来讲是不成立的世俗谛，是否每人的成立不成立的世俗谛是不同呢？仁波切说是的，每个人的成立不成立的世俗谛是不一样的。那你现在讲的是更深入、更深入的讲法，而且更多的细节。因为我们要记得，我们说世俗谛的时候，它是完全虚设的，是冲动的，是虚构出来的。那这位师兄又问说，那仁波切说，那所以呢，我们要在这样的一个层面去接受轮回，因为你一旦分析了以后说轮回不存在，那就出了问题了。
Last one. The Helen, yeah. Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, so I was saying if you don't accept reincarnation, but as an alternative model which works better for you, can you just use heaven and hell, for example? Is that okay?
如果你不接受轮回的话，那你有什么其他的选择？是否可以选择相信有天堂和地狱呢？
Okay, now this is opening up some Pandora box here. Okay.
我们这里就打开了一个潘多拉盒。
see, the thing is this: if you do not accept reincarnation, you are talking about not accepting a continuity, which means you are automatically asserting the ultimate end. That is the problem.
因为如果你不接受轮回，也就是你不接受持续性，这自动的，这就是说你就自动说呢，这个有这个究竟的结束，这就是问题所在。
So those people, those so-called atheists or whatever, who sort of pride themselves not accepting the reincarnation, they, without knowingly, they end up becoming theistic, actually, almost, because then you almost like, by consequence, they end up believing in Armageddon.
因为这些所谓的无神论者，他们不接受这个轮回呢，事实上他们不自觉的已经成为一个有神论者，因为基于他们的推理呢，实际上他们作为他们推理的一个结果呢，是他们相信世界末日。
So that's what I mean by. So what's the point of cherry picking the mindfulness? Why be mindful if there's no reincarnation? Why not just go out and rob bank and, do whatever? As long as you are not caught, which you can try your best not to be caught. And a lot of people get away with it. Why behave? It's so painful to behave.
那你又何必去单单去挑出这个正念的修法呢？因为你倒不如你去外面去抢劫银行，只要你不被抓就可以，你可以尽你的可能不被抓，反正有很多人都是这样子，都没有被抓。那你何必要有很好的行为呢？要有很好的行为是多么痛苦的一件事。
Because more specifically, to answer your question, the hell and the heaven that you are talking about sounds like it's the end. Then it won't work. Ultimate end won't work.
那你刚才讲的这个天堂和地狱，听起来像是最终的结果。如果是这样的话，那是行不通的。
If you believe in the ultimate end, you are, by consequences, you are not believing that time is relative.
因为如果你相信有究竟的最终点的话，那依于这个理论，你就它的这个结果呢，就是你不相信时间是相对的。
Okay. I'll give it to somebody else.
No, you can ask.
Okay. I'm not. It's not the specifics of heaven and hell. I'm worried. I'm not suggesting that that's a better model. I'm just trying to understand whether it's the specifics of the. It's just about finding the best model, I'm trying. And the specifics of the reincarnation model.
I think. Okay. To be fair, I forgot to be fair, by the way.
要公平一点，而且忘了要公平一点。
I think the word reincarnation got contaminated by the Tibetans a bit, which I accept.
我认为轮回转世这个字被西藏人污染了一点。
Because there's something called a reincarnate tulkus and all of that.
因为有转世的主骨。
Yeah, the reincarnation is really. The Tibetan word for reincarnation is yangsi. Yangsi. Again, meaning again exist. As simple as that. Again exist. Basically, we are talking about a continuity. And continuity isn't arbitrary.
转世这个在藏文里面叫 yangsi。yangsi 的意思就是又在存在，它就是这么简单的意思。那又在存在，实际上它的意思就是持续，而持续或持续性呢，本身是虚构的、虚设的。
Wow. Things like continuity, infinite, all. These are some of the prize-winning arbitrary stuff that we came up with. It's just so ridiculously arbitrary, but it's just so much used. What do we mean by all? What does that mean? What does it include? All. All are welcome. Like the all. What does that mean? Infinite.
持续性、无量无边、所有，这些都是一些我们所就是 we came up as in Buddhists came up, right?
No, human beings.
Human beings, sorry. 这些都是我们人类所创造出来的、所想出来的一些最可以获奖的一些最高的虚设的东西。他们是最令人最荒谬的一些虚设的东西，可是他们有用。那我们每当说所有，这个所有是什么意思呢？它包括了什么人呢？就我们这些概念，所有无量无边的这些概念。
By the way, I mean, you don't think that this is just some, intellectual sort of words, like, throwing back and forth. Because, for instance, like ourselves, we have this notion that today's me is yesterday's me, the same thing, which is another absurd thing.
那你不要认为我们这些只是把一些这聪明的字语呢，就是前后翻来覆去的丢来丢去。比方说我们自己，我们有这样的想法，就是今天的我和昨天的我是同样的东西，这又是一个完全荒谬的东西。
What do we mean by same anyway?
那当我们说一样，我们说的是什么呢？一样是什么意思？
If you look at all our words, it's all vain. I mean, vague. All our words are vague. Same. What does that mean?
其实你看，我们所用的所有的字语都是很含糊、模糊不清的。一样，这是什么意思？
Because I went to toilet yesterday, does that mean that I don't need to go today?
我昨天上厕所，是不是说今天就不必上厕所？
Because it's the same person, right?
因为是同一个人。
That's not true.
这不是真的。
We cannot also say that we are two different entities. Yesterday's me and today's me.
我们也不能够说昨天的我和今天的我是两个不同的个体。
Again, the same thing, but it's different.
同样的问题，有什么不同？
So all this, now these are really a good description of relative truth. Better not analyze too much. Because if you analyze, you fall into the ultimate. And then the Vajrachyadika wins.
这些都是对于世俗谛非常非常好的描述，就是你不要去分析的太多，因为你一旦分析的话，你就会堕入这个究竟的这个圣义谛，然后这时候《金刚经》就赢了，它就胜了。
I mean, when I say better don't analyze, I'm saying, as in, since we are trying to establish what is relative truth, to understand what is relative truth, better not analyze. Of course, as a practitioner, that's the purpose. We analyze.
那仁波切说最好不要去分析。他是说，当我们要理解什么是世俗谛的时候，就不要去分析的太多。但是当然，作为修行人，我们应该去分析。
Okay, yeah.
Just one more. So relative valid truth. Is it fair to say that the power of prostrations is in the consensus element of it, and that if I genuinely came to believe and therefore experience that doing press-ups, for argument's sake, had got rid of my pride, then that would be equally functional?
Yes, because, probably not so much of the actual act of falling and folding the hands together. That is just a trick. It's a necessary ritual trick until somebody came up with another idea.
So it's just the consensus then?
Wait, I'll first say this.
那他的问题是说，是否是这个大礼拜对我来讲是一个成立的世俗谛？是因为因为大家公认的认为大礼拜有帮助，那我也开始相信它，所以因为是大家公认的，所以我就有这样的一个体验啊什么。那仁波切说，是的，但并不真的是因为你做这个大礼拜，你的人塌下来、倒下来，然后你的手合掌等等，这些都只是一个把戏，是一个非常有必要的仪式。直到有什么人在发明发展出一些新的方法。
Consensus in this case is like, okay, pride is not a good thing. Everybody sort of agrees that. Falling down at the feet of somebody is, really, really a big, like sacrifice. So let's do that 100,000 times, on that level kind of consensus.
当我们说这个公认的时候，就是大家都同意的东西呢。这里我们大家公认的都是这个自大啊、自大啊、傲慢啊，这是不好的。大家几乎都是同意这一点。那我们也会认为，如果我们把自己就是趴下到别人的脚下的时候，这是一个很大的牺牲。那我们就做10万遍这样的东西，这就是所谓的公认。
So for this reason, to be Buddhist does not mean that you have to have 100,000 prostrations. You have to defeat the pride. And if that means something else, like cooking omelette 100,000 times, if that's what it requires, then that's how it, that depends on your own individual coach.
那所以呢，我们佛教徒，我们要做的是要摧毁我们的傲慢心。如果要摧毁，所以你不一定要做10万遍的大礼拜，你主要的是要摧毁傲慢心。也就是说，对于某些人来讲，如果你要摧毁傲慢心，你需要煮10万个这个煎蛋，那你也可以这么做。这都看个人的这个教练怎么说，个人的导师怎么说。
Okay, I think this will. Oh, one more. Yeah. Okay, Rowan. 2 more. This and here, and then we will finish. Okay.
I'm stuck between 2 questions, but I'll take the more straightforward one.
You have to represent the British.
Well, I was wondering, and I can't represent the British, but my brothers and sisters in Britain properly, but I really was wondering whether you were being fair to them, because I just was wondering whether their view, they're saying, and I really don't know, they're saying there's no reincarnation, but I was wondering whether they were implying that the perhaps Tibetan view of reincarnation is very much about one person becoming another person, and that they're not against Yangtze. They don't believe that there's an end, but just the continuation is more subtle. And if you said, well, how does that affect behavior? I mean, why is it important to behave in a certain way? As long as time is relative, the reason it's good for me to behave well is to stop my world from becoming a hell realm. It doesn't matter that if you say, well, it's going to end at that point, it doesn't all end. We transform into different forms of energy. My memory will maintain in different ways. It doesn't just end. It's just, I can't have if I was a person of great merit, there would be no actual tulku of Rowan. And I think that they gesture towards...
Can you repeat the last bit? No, I really missed it.
It's not an appropriate image. I was saying, if I were a person of great merit,
right,
and I died, and I managed to become, through you, a great practitioner, the British Buddhists would say there wouldn't actually be a tulku of Rowan You know, it's just a rather useful thing to continue things. They're a bit suspicious of all that. But they don't say everything just ends. There's no feeling that Yangtze, that there is no continuum. And when you say, well, how come, why should you behave? Well, the reason you should behave is because of cause and effect, because you will, if you behave badly, you'll create bad...
Oh, I see, yeah. Yeah. If you believe in that kind of continuity, yes, definitely you should behave. But what I'm saying is, if, through the analysis, you see, it's the consequence thing. You see, my argument is this. You accept the mindfulness, which is as arbitrary as reincarnation. By accepting the mindfulness and by sort of not accepting the reincarnation, it implies to me, you understand what I'm saying? That this does not exist and this exists. And this is a dangerous. Because if reincarnation does not exist, meaning if there is no continuity, then you become, there are actually Buddhists who says that you will become part of the dust and the particles and the part of the universe and all of that. I'm serious. There are many Buddhists who says that, and it is wrong. Well, why, what's the difference between a hoodlum in New York and the gangsters in London and the practitioners in Bodh Gaya practicing, we will all become a part of the universe anyway. And those guys are having a lot of fun. And here we are in the dust. We are missing a lot. Anyway, we are going to be part of the, particles of the universe. So why not? Why behave? That's what I'm saying.
这位师兄基本上是要替着英国的佛教徒说点话，就是他自己解说，从他的看法，一些英国佛教徒并非反对转世轮回或者持续性。那仁波切的回复是说，如果你相信的是这种持续性，那就有道理。那就是为什么你如果相信持续性，你就要有一个好的行为，这有道理。但是如果危险的，这样的想法是危险的，因为你如果不接受轮回，你就不接受持续性。那甚至有佛教徒，有很多佛教徒认为你死了以后，你就化成微尘，你就化成微尘，成为这个宇宙，与宇宙合一。有很多佛教徒那么说。那这样的话，问题是你看看这个在伦敦的那些这个流氓，还有在菩提迦耶的修行人，他们都一样吗？到最后都只是成为这个宇宙间的灰尘。那我们干嘛那么可怜，要困在这里，要在这个迦耶这里，在所有的尘埃之中呢？我们现在不是失去了很多好玩的时光嘛？我们倒不如跑去玩，因为反正最后我们也只不过是这个宇宙间的一个微尘一样而已。
I will have to extend my battlefield a little bit here.
仁波切要在这里扩充他的战场。
The Buddhists who believe that we will become part of, particles, part of the universe, is not just British Buddhists, it's French and Vietnamese.
仁波切说，那些相信这个你死了以后会成为这个宇宙的一个微尘，这并不只是这个英国的佛教徒，包括法国和越南的佛教徒。
And I'm sure as I get old, more fanatical and more desperate and more frustrated, in the very near future, I will be mentioning the names.
我很确定，当我越来越狂热、越来越绝望、越来越疯狂的时候，越来越烦躁的时候，我会提出一些名字。
If you become parts of the universe, particle of the universe, the whole point of the 1,000 Buddhas coming under the Bodhi tree is wasted. Total waste.
如果你就是成为宇宙中的微尘的话，那这千尊佛来到菩提树下的理由都完全浪费了。
When you say you there, Rinpoche, to what independent functioning entity are you referring to?
What are you trying? What did you say?
Rinpoche, when you said, well, if you become particles of dust, which isn't what I'm implying, but what is the you you're referring to? What is this? Is this independent entity the thing that is going to become reincarnated?
Well, I would not have any problem if, because you see, my you, are you talking to me or the Vietnamese? Because they will have a problem of answering your question. Because their you does exhaust. My you is an arbitrary. It's an impute, impulse, arbitrary, caprice, whim. Remember? It's a real whim here. And for me, my position is totally intact. Therefore, my you can be analyzed and then can get realized the, egolessness, you-lessness, basically. Whereas these people, they will have no you-lessness, because there you become a part of the particle. There you become bigger. At least my you is only 157 centimeter, and like this. There you will become the big universe. My God, the big problem. If these Vietnamese become as big as this universe, and the French, we will have so much blue cheese.
那这位师兄问的是，当你说这个，仁波切刚才一直说你成为这个宇宙的微尘，那师兄问你说的这个你是不是一个独立的个体？这个独立的个体将会持续的在转世等等。那仁波切说，你说的这个你。如果是持续的话，这个是没有问题的，对仁波切而言是没有问题的。但是他们就是那些越南人、法国人，他们说的这个你是有问题的，因为仁波切说的这个你是虚设的，是冲动投射出来的，它是虚构的，它是就是虚设的。那所以仁波切的立场坚定，没有动摇，他保留了他的立场。那因此呢，仁波切的你是可以被分析的，所以呢，仁波切通过这个方法，他是可以了悟无我的或者无你，他可以了悟这个无你性、无我性。但是这些人呢，他们说的这个没有你是很大的问题的，他们的这个你呢，会变成这个宇宙的微尘，那这个问题就是非常的大。仁波切的这个你呢，或者仁波切的这个我呢，它只不过是157cm 这样长而已，1.5米长而已。但是他们的这个你是整个宇宙那么大，这是一个很大的问题。你想象，如果这些越南人、法国人，他变得跟宇宙那样大，那我们每个人都要吃这个他们的知识了，他们的法国知识。
I have a different question regarding the Mahabodhi temple and the tree we are sitting beneath. If you could give us some explanation how we can get most of this place.
If I can explain?
Yeah, if you can give us some more details about this auspicious place.
他想知道多一点关于这个大觉寺和菩提树的事情。
Buddhists believe in cause and condition. Everything is cause and condition and effect.
佛教徒相信因缘和果，所有一切都是因缘和果。
This is one very supreme cause and condition.
这是一个非常这个至高无上的这个因和缘。
This is a cause and condition that you will share with 1,000 Buddhas.
这是一个你会和1000尊佛一起分享的因缘。
This is a cause and condition that you directly share at this eon, right now with the Shakyamuni Buddha.
这是一个你现在会直接和释迦牟尼佛在这一个节里面分享的因缘。
And it has to be cause and condition because you, instead of drinking beer somewhere in Germany, you are here.
这必定是因缘，因为你现在不是在德国喝啤酒，你人在这里。
You are pulled, pushed.
你被推、被拉着过来。
So, this cause and condition need to be taken advantage.
所以这样的因缘你必须去善用。
So you can also pray and aspire that one day you will also be just like all these 1,000 Buddhas.
所以你可以祈祷，可以发愿，有一天你会像这1000尊佛一样。
Supposedly very, very special place here.
这是一个非常非常特殊的地方。
Okay, well, I'm sorry. Sometimes I get sort of what do you call it? Get carried away a bit.
对不起，我有时候会被我会扯得有点远。
And sounding more and more like Suresh and SP.
听起来越来越像 Suresh 和 SP。
I try not to have conversation with them, but somehow the karmic link and debt seems to pull and push towards them.
我试图不要跟他们有任何的谈话，可是这个业的我们的因缘还有我们的业债呢，一直牵着我、拖着我、推动着我去接近他们。
Okay, so tomorrow.
明天再继续。